This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the place to go for all of your website needs. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/Hugh for a free trial, and if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code Hugh at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. We just had one seat open up for our Streets of New York October workshop, so if you're interested, grab it while you can. Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for Three Blind Men and an Elephant, and in my typical run-on sentence fashion, though I actually have fun with it, I will cut to the chase. Panasonic's just announced $1,900 brand new 25.2 megapixel sensor equipped, phase detection autofocus equipped, oh baby, next gen processor equipped, 7.5 to 8 stops IBIS equipped, 100 megapixel handheld pixel shift imaging, dynamic range boosted, both improved over the GH6, USB-C power delivery enabled, dust, splash, and freeze resistant, photocentric Lumix G9 Mark II. Shooting, by the way, somewhat belying its photocentric positioning, up to 60 frames per second with continuous autofocus, yet also capable of 10-bit 422 up to DCI 4K 60p no crop, 10-bit 420 up to DCI 4K 120p, 10-bit 420, 5.7K up to 30p, 10-bit 420, 5.8K OpenGate ProRes HQ 4Q 422 up to 60 frames per second, blah 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 blah, because there is a whole lot more, including ergos and build quality identical to the full-frame S5 II. Well, the G9 II is a very compelling camera and as good as, possibly better than, argument for sub-full frame cameras in 2023 than its most direct competitors, Fujifilm's excellent 26.2 megapixel APS-C XH2S and $2,000 XH2, may be more compelling than many full-frame cameras, just about all full-frame cameras, for telephoto and super telephoto shooting. Maybe. In any case, it says something about both systems that they compete not only against each other, but do compete well against full-frame cameras, beginning most especially with Panasonic's own $2,000 full-frame S5 II, and, as of a few days ago, Sony's full-frame 33-megapixel A7C II. It depends, as always, upon one's priorities, use cases, and budget, so let's get into it. I've been playing with the G9 II for a couple of weeks now, with three lenses. Their $900 Leica DG Vario Elmer at 12 to 35 2.8, a 24 to 70 equivalent, and their $1,100 DG Vario Elmer at 35 to 100 2.8, Holy Trinity zooms, the equivalent of a 70 to 200, along with the $1,600 Mark II version of their Leica DG Vario Elmar 100 to 400 f4 to 6.3. But I began our time with the camera most interested in the big boy 100 to 400, taking it out to our usual test location for super telephoto primes and zooms in Long Island City. Two shots in, I realized I had to recalibrate my perception of this camera, the lenses for it, and the Micro Four Thirds format altogether. Because I admit I had reached the point in my own journey, having switched to full frame after using a GH5 as our daily driver for the better part of 3 years. We bought it the day it became available in March 2017, that I actually did expect the G9 to be too little too late. But I was wrong. In fact, not only did I start with the 100 to 400, a full-frame equivalent field of view and shallowest depth of field of 200 to 800 f8 to f12.6, but before we left the house, I took off the tripod collar. And I left at home the heavy-duty tripod with gimbal head I've used for all of my super telephoto zoom test shots over the last, 4 years or so. I mean, what do all of the G9 II's specs matter? What does the theoretical value of a smaller format sensor with crazy good IBIS matter if I can't, say, shoot 1.03 miles as the crow flies across the East River to photograph the Chrysler Building handheld? Yeah, handheld. And it turns out I could shoot this sucker handheld. Okay, some shots were braced against a guardrail, but that had never worked with full-frame lenses in the past. Anyway, sold. One and done. 1 minute in, I have never been able to shoot such a detailed shot from so far away in so small, light, and hand-holdable a package. Not even close. I wish there was more resolution, but hold that thought. I'd say, equalized for image size and in good light, it outperformed Sony's 100-400 G Master on the 50-megapixel Sony A1 lent to me back in the day by my friend Mark Foreman, even when the Sony combo was mounted on that big tripod with gimbal head I mentioned a moment ago. But what do you think? Also say it outperformed Nikon's 400mm f4.5 VRZ Prime on Claudia's 45-megapixel Z7 II, again, equalized for image size, in good light, and mounted on the same tripod and gimbal head. But again, what do you think? But the truly confounding thing is this. When I loaded all of the images from the day and I took a gander at what I had thought were perfunctory shots taken with the 12-35, I mean, how could it possibly compare to our Sony 24-70 2.8 G Master II mounted on our 60-megapixel full-frame A7R5? How could I possibly get the shots I really wanted when the shallowest depth of field on the 12-35 would be the full-frame equivalent of f5.6? I got a real kick in the head, which is to say, once I got out of my head, that is, once I shot with the 12-35mm, not as myself, but as an enthusiast, and used it for what it is instead of becoming frustrated by what it is not, I still had fun. And my lower back thanked me in the morning. Now, much as I dislike at or near minimum focusing distance testing down in the BAT studio, I then subjected both myself and the 12-35 2.8 to it. And to my surprise yet again, although it really shouldn't have been all that surprising by this point, I found this little 12-35 to be better than I had anticipated even into the corners. Quite well matched to the 25.2 megapixel sensor. Okay. A week or two after that, Claudia and I were in Washington, D.C. to tour the White House and the Capitol building, but the heat was so extreme, the humidity so awful, that we couldn't hit the streets the way we'd planned. Instead, now I slapped on the 35-100 2.8, went up to a rooftop terrace, racked out to 100 millimeters, the full-frame equivalent of 200 millimeters, and I fired off a single 4-frame multi-shot burst of the Capitol building through 92-degree heat, handheld. Then again, is this the best use of multi-shot? No. Professional product shots or archival art documentation are better candidates for this kind of technology for now because they are static and details count the most. There are two other lessons you might have picked up from the test shots I showed of the helicopter and the seaplane over the East River. 1. Autofocus finally works well. No more apologia. You're already seeing this for video too because I'm recording this video with the G9 II and the 12-35. Hang on a second, let me show you how it works. But those two shots of small flying objects in the middle of an otherwise empty sky demonstrate that the G9 II's autofocus is competitive with full-frame cameras for use cases more demanding than ours, if still not quite as performant at the margin as Sony's best autofocusing cameras. In my experience, these kinds of shots were simply not possible with any Lumix camera before hybrid phase detection. In fact, I learned to stop trying, because contrast detection autofocus, even with DFD, only resulted in perpetual hunting. But these two shots were cake. I did not expect that they would turn out. I shot them only so I could tell you the G9 II's autofocus still isn't all that, except that it turns out it is. 2. Resolution was already sufficient to make large prints with the original 20-megapixel G9. Those of you who know me or have followed the channel for a while know that we have a 50-inch print on the long side hanging on one of our walls taken with the original G9, but the extra resolution of the Mark II, not dramatic, but visible, combined with the performance of the glass and an autofocus system good enough to match both, allows even greater croppability. For general purpose photography, then travel photography, most street photography, product photography, food photography, some sports and wildlife photography. Brilliant, I think, for safari photography, especially for the enthusiast. The G9 II reestablishes Micro Four Thirds as a very legitimate, smaller, lighter, and less expensive alternative to full-frame cameras. But of course, not all is perfect in Toyland. Nothing ever is. Although, once again, whether or not these things matter to you is a function of your circumstances. Even with the clearly improved, I'm delighted to tell you, dynamic range boost function, it just didn't live up to the promise in the GH6, the best full-frame cameras still have better dynamic range than the G9 II. The flip side is it is just as easy to flub the exposure in a full-frame camera, and those cameras, even at 15-plus stops of dynamic range compared to the 13-plus stops quoted for the G9 II, will blow out highlights or crush blacks if one gets the exposure wrong. What I've learned, and had reinforced recently multiple times, is that when dynamic range is too great, the answer is not use the camera with the highest quoted dynamic range, but instead either A, use exposure bracketing. Think scenes where movement is not an issue, most especially architectural, I suppose. Or B, control the dynamic range of a scene before taking the shot by using auxiliary lighting, diffusion, reflectors. You know what those things are. Do those kinds of things, which again, one should actually do irrespective of one's camera, and the G9 II will reward you. The far greater issue, as far as I'm concerned, is that the G9 II, to be fair, like the G9 before it, doesn't have a fan. And therefore, again, like the original G9, doesn't offer unlimited internal recording. But once again, there is a flip side. First, the lack of a fan is also what allows the G9 II to be dust, moisture, and freeze resistant, important for the adventure photographers among us especially, since those locations on the G9 II body where the S5 II incarnation has fan vents have been sealed. Second, if you don't do long-form recording, at Three Blind Men and an Elephant we do, A, the G9 II does, again like the original, offer at least shutter angle, a tiny bit of firmware that makes switching back and forth between stills and video frame rates easier than any hybrid camera that doesn't have it. And B, for the hardcore filmmakers among us, the G9 II also retains anamorphic D-squeeze, V-Log view assist and HLG view assist, waveform and vector scope, and in order to capitalize on the fact that it can shoot ProRes, not ProRes RAW or Blackmagic RAW, or simply help to navigate around that internal recording limit, can record to an external SSD via USB-C. But the biggest issues that remain from my perspective are also the most costly for Panasonic to address. Limited lens selection, the absence of an even smaller camera with the same functionality, and higher resolution sensors. First, over the past 5 years, like Sony, Nikon, and Canon, Panasonic has chosen to invest more heavily in full-frame lenses than sub-full-frame lenses. Makes sense to me. The net result is that too much of the Micro Four Thirds lens catalog, I think it's fair to say, is a bit long in the tooth compared to their full-frame competitors when considered en toto, that is, the gestalt of size, weight, performance, build quality, shallowest depth of field, and simple delight in hand. I'd wish, for example, that Sigma might make Micro Four Thirds versions, as in even smaller and lighter, of their brilliant I-series primes, or that Viltrox would do the same for their new and outstanding, if too large I think for Micro Four Thirds as is, 1.2 Pro lenses. Secondly, I'd love to see Panasonic really leverage the promise of smaller, lighter, and less expensive in a new rangefinder-style Micro Four Thirds body with the G9 II's innards. Which segues quite nicely into the third issue, which I will only really touch upon because I am coming back round to the point I used to make regularly. 24 to 26 megapixel sensors are more than enough for most of us most of the time. A high-resolution Micro Four Thirds sensor is an issue less because most of us need it, less because full-frame and now APS-C systems have 40-plus megapixel sensors, than because smartphone companies are touting high-resolution sensors, whether or not they are in fact worth all that much. My point is only that Panasonic may have to fight against the perception that smartphones are better, and the reality that they often are better than most dedicated cameras, irrespective of sensor size or resolution, because they are much easier to use, far smaller and lighter, and we always have them on us. I will wrap it up this way for now because, yes, there's a lot more to go over and I should test them. I will. Bottom line, I was wrong. The G9 II proves Micro Four Thirds is back and relevant for anything less than what I'll call at the margin, pinnacle, and therefore expensive performance. Where it best competes against full-frame systems, it is significantly smaller, lighter, and less expensive, as in somewhere between 1/2 and 1/3 the cost of top-end full-frame systems. And it does things, for now, that smartphones can't, a critical consideration for its very survival. It is great in hand. The autofocus is now excellent. They don't cheap out on the EVF, and it is extraordinarily well featured not only as a photocentric camera, but as a video hybrid too. With a menu system and touch interface, I prefer to those of Sony, Canon, Nikon, and Fujifilm. Put simply, if you have not yet made the move to mirrorless interchangeable lens camera systems, or you're looking to downsize, or you're looking to move beyond just photography to become a hybrid shooter, maybe even a YouTuber, the G9 II should be at or near the top of your list. But the competition is fierce. And you ought to look at Panasonic's S5 II, Fujifilm's X-H2 series, maybe even the XS20, and Sony's A7C II in particular. This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From custom domains to beautiful websites using their easily customizable templates that you can have up and running in minutes, e-commerce, email and email marketing, SEO, analytics, and scheduling, Squarespace does it all and has done it for us for the last 6 years. If you are a small to mid-sized business in any industry, Squarespace is the place to go for all of your website needs. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/Hugh for a free trial. And if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code Hugh at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. If you like what you've seen here today, please give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, join the conversation in the comment section below because this is an exceptional audience. If you'd like help with a portfolio review, gear selection, finding or honing your artistic voice, sign up for a one-on-one mentoring video call via Zoom at 3bmep.com/booking. Finally, please consider supporting our work by using the no-cost to you affiliate links down below, sending us coffee money via PayPal, or most especially, joining us on Patreon, links down below as well. However you choose to support us, as always, we thank you for